I mean, at the end of the day, with this rezoning, there's gonna be a lot of new townhouses coming to the market, hitting that 700 plus market pretty hard. Townhouses in Calgary are now worth $420,000 with the expectation that we actually might fall to $399 by the end of the year. We're currently down $43,000 from the highs that we saw in June of 2024. We're down around $24,000 from this time last year, yet we're up $500 from last month. Now, considering the Calgary Real Estate Board has indicated that the townhouse market could see a 3 to 5% decline in 2026, that leads us in an area of about $408,000 to $399,000, depending on how things unfold throughout 2026. So let's actually go through and look at a couple of the quadrants here and just check out what the heck's going on. Now, we're gonna look at West and we're gonna look at South. So we're gonna start with the Western quadrant here, and we're gonna actually double check to see what's going on. They got 159 listings throughout the entire quadrant. Now, the West quadrant, especially compared to the South quadrant, has very large amounts of high-end townhouses. Like, this is absolutely beautiful townhouse for 1.5 million. I wish I could show you, but unfortunately I can't. So with that in mind, they got 159. So when we look at the South quadrant here, and we actually go over here, they have 186. But let's put into practice and actually figure out what the market size is, right? Take this with a grain of salt. This is a little bit of an AI kick, but South has roughly around 8,800 units, where West has 4,000. And this is also the districts that the CMHC sees, so it's not the exact same districts as how the Calgary Real Estate Board sees it. But either way, we can see that South Calgary, going all the way down here, have around 85 listings active. They've got roughly, look at all the pendings, they got 109, or sorry, about 25, and then they've got quite a bit of solds here. So very large, differences in the amount of sales happening in the South versus West, but you can see just how affordable the South is. And the crazy thing is, the affordable market, well, not the crazy thing, but the most obvious thing is the affordable market is still moving in Calgary. It's the high-end market that's actually taking a hit, which is quite obvious. So when we look at some of the tubular stuff here, we're just gonna do a very quick comparison of the two. You can see that solds are 33 for the West and solds are 47 for the South. You can see that the average price here for the South is 430, but look at the average price for the West. So obviously when we're looking at the market and we're trying to dive into the data and we're trying to figure out what the heck's going on, you need to put yourself into perspective as to if you're willing to spend $560,000 on a 3-bed, 1,500 square foot, or if you're only willing to spend $430,000 on a 3-bed, 1,300 square foot property, because they're all gonna be very different in what the actual market is doing. So with that in mind, my name's Adam Fife. This is the type of stuff that we cover when you go ahead and you book a Zoom call with me, and we talk about what kind of plans you're gonna have for 2026, links in the description. So let's see what the Calgary Real Estate Board has written about the townhouse market, and we'll go from there. There were 186 sales in January, down nearly 25% compared to last year. Meanwhile, supply continued to rise both in terms of new listings and inventory growth, causing the months of supply to push above 4 months. Despite the added supply, the unadjusted benchmark price remained similar to December levels, but was 5% lower than last January. The month-over-month stability was due to gains in the city center and west districts. Year-over-year price adjustments have been the highest in the northeast and east districts, followed by the north and southeast districts, which have faced significant competition from the new home market, which is absolutely going to be a thing basically for the entire city. I mean, at the end of the day, with this rezoning, there's gonna be a lot of new townhouses coming to the market, hitting that 700 plus market pretty hard. So when we take a peek here, this is just a quick snapshot of the last 7 days. Today is February 7th. You can see that there's 123 new listings. 68 of them have seen price decreases, so about half have seen price decreases. There's 82 pending, which is all right. 77 solds, which is not that strong. 20 expired and 18 terminated. So clearly you can see that there's a shift here for more buyer market activity, especially with those 68 price reductions, which is literally half of the number of new listings coming to the market. So with that in mind, you can see that we've been on a pretty steady trajectory downwards ever since Q2 of last year, which is quite common across the entire market for all property types. Now, we did see a stabilization here for price. I don't really think that's gonna last very long. It is great to see the sales increase. Obviously, the inventory is gonna increase. We're gonna notice the inventory increasing every single month for the foreseeable future until we hit the summer. It'll be interesting to see how high the sales raise. I don't think we're gonna hit the peaks that we saw last year. We're probably gonna be a little bit less, meaning that the price point is gonna continue to go down, especially as inventory most likely outweighs what we saw last year for the entire city of Calgary, okay? So when we start to break this down and we start to look at sales, we are significantly lower than what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. You know, in 2022 and 2024, we saw almost 300 sales in January. Now we're below 200, which is the first time we've seen that since 2021, right? We are significantly less. The activity slowed down a lot. You can see in terms of price activity, again, talking about that more affordable range, right? Where that south quadrant really does have more than west. You can see the activity has actually upticked compared to last year, but every other property minus the 700,000 and then I guess a million plus saw a little uptick from years prior, but this market is absolutely going to get hit pretty hard. So with that in mind, new listings, right? New listings are obviously coming to the market in droves. Now that the rezoning has been around, probably about 12 months now, maybe 10 or 11, we are going to see more new listings come to the market, again, in that higher price range, pushing that higher price range down. But that more competitive price range around 3 to 4 is still going to stay fairly active. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of shifts in price point there. Now, when we start to look at the expired listings, this is fascinating. So this month we did dip down to 75, but look at our peaks, right? Our peaks were actually record-setting peaks that we've seen in the last 5 years. And I would imagine we're going to see a small valley here, and it's going to continue to go back up even higher. You can see for townhouses, we dipped down to citywide 5, 7 listings and expired in 1 month, which is pretty crazy. We're not going to see those again anytime soon. We're probably going to continue in the higher ranges. When you look back 10 years, right, you can see that in 2016 to 2021, you know, we've kind of seen what we've seen before, right? You can see obviously these were very depressed years for Calgary, but you can see we actually had a peak and more of an average of around 150 in the slow seasons. So we haven't hit those highs quite yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get there. Now, when you look at the months of supply, you can see that we are still increasing, right? Unlike the single family market, we're still seeing increases of months of supply, meaning the market is actively slowing down, which is again an indicator that we're probably going to see more price reductions. Now, it is still in buyer's balance territory, definitely inching a lot more into the balance or the buyer's territory as we progress through the spring. I would imagine we might see a little bit of a dip or a flat line, but it's probably going to stay fairly elevated all throughout 2026 as a lot of the new construction comes to the market with the rezoning as well as new development in communities. Now, when we look at this, right, days on market has actually stayed relatively flat, right? We're at 50 days in October, November, December, and again in January. So in terms of the days on market, we're actually staying relatively stable from what we've seen over the last 4 months. But when you actually look at the price point, we've dipped about $10,000 just in those 4 months, right? So yeah, the market's still moving the same amount that it has, but people are being a lot more aggressive on their price offerings, driving that down. You can see the median price increase, the average price actually increased by a little bit, right? Indicating that a little bit more activity in the higher end market. But even though that higher end market is still pushing those prices downwards, right? Because that benchmark price, well, I guess it stayed the same, but for the most part, when you look at the actual benchmark over the last 4 months, it's fallen. So with that in mind, current days on market. Current days on market, you remove it from the market, you put it back on the market within 2 weeks, it still increases that number of CDOM, which is current days. You can see that we're actually right in line with what we've seen in 2021 going into 2022. But I highly doubt we're gonna get down to these valleys that we saw over those very hot seller market years. We'll probably finish off around 40 days, maybe 45 days because the market's going to slow down. But I don't think we're going to dip down into anything remotely close to what we've seen over the last little while. When you look at the 10-year average, again, these were quite depressed years for Calgary. So it's not obviously the best to compare to, but we haven't actually slowed down as much as what we have seen over the last 10 years yet. We'll see what happens in the future. Now, months of supply. I mean, you can see here, for the most part, we're in balanced territory, or sorry, buyer's balanced territory. You know, the average here is about 4 to 6 months, which is, you know, buyer's market territory. But you can still see, you know, the southeast and the south and the east still sitting in more balanced territory. More balanced actually right at 3 months, meaning that the market still is going to move at an okay rate. We shouldn't see as much price movement in those areas, but there still is a lot of power for the buyer. Now, with that in mind, obviously, we're going to see some price decreases consistently. We're going to see as low as in the Northwest, you can see just over 2% year over year, and the East District, which is getting smacked just all over town in everything. The Northeast is losing in semis, in rows and semis and apartments and in detached. They are leading the charge in every single property type. So keep that in mind. Now, when we go here, I'm just going to move this up. Okay, I'm gonna move that up here and then I'll go over here and we'll go back. You can see that the West Quadrant has actually seen the biggest increase in price point. They had 18 sales, 77 new listings, only 23% sales to new listing ratio, but those that sold actually sold at a significant rate, which pushed those benchmark attributes up. Now, if you want to know what those benchmark attributes are, there is a link in the description going over every single quadrant, giving you those exact attributes, letting you know for that benchmark price of $454,000, you're looking at around a 2-bed, 2 full bath, 1 half bath built in 1996 in the Western District. So you have to go and look at every single quadrant and figure out what that looks like, right? As an example, in East, there's no garage. So obviously the price point's going to be significantly less. 272 doesn't even have a garage. So you want to make sure that you're actually overlapping this information with the attributes to make sure that you're getting an accurate photo of what your current property could be valued at, or what properties are doing for that specific attribute in that area, so that you can be a little bit more competitive and educated if you were to go as a buyer into the market. So with that in mind, we are going to continue to see year-over-year losses. We have actually seen an uptick, right? So last month it was below 5%. This month it was above 5%. This month it is below 5%. So we might see it kind of flatline here a little bit because it's a fairly steady trajectory downwards, right? You can see these huge drops when you are absolutely tanking at a faster rate, right? Your steep climb down, making your year over year fairly consistent as a consistent stretch here. But now we're probably going to stick around that 3-5% as recorded by the Calgary Real Estate Board. So we might see the price dip from 430 to potentially 399, right? 320, or sorry, 430 to 399 or 415-ish. Wow, I'm really tripping here. So with that in mind, we are at, right, Q1 of 2024 prices right now for the attributes of a townhouse in Calgary. I would imagine we're going to continue to see a slowdown. So if you are a buyer out there, go and do your research. Take your time and actually go and look at the data. If you're a seller, make sure you do the same thing, right? You have time to actually make sure that you plan it properly and you don't get caught up with the norm of staying on market, as an example, for an average of 38 days. You might be able to beat that by going in and pricing it correctly, marketing it right, and getting on there. Well, it's actually crazy that the actives and the solds are averaging 38 days right now. You don't see that very often. But anyways, my name is Adam Fife. I hope you're doing well. We'll see you on the next one. Peace. Brutal.